The bell over the pawn shop door rang at 9:03 a.m., and Linda knew something was off before she even looked up. Because the sound came with a scrape, the slow drag of plastic over concrete, the kind of noise that doesn't belong in a tidy little Mesa pawn shop on a weekday morning. Ray was behind the counter balancing yesterday's receipts, the neon pawn sign humming like an old refrigerator, when an elderly man eased through the doorway with a careful strain of someone hauling more than weight. He was retired, late 60s, maybe 70. Ball cap, clean work boots, a face that had learned to smile through worry. And he had both hands locked on the rims of two full-size curbside trash bins. One blue, one green, the classic American kind you see lined up by garage doors. They were scuffed, sun-faded, and still dusty at the wheels, as if they'd rolled straight out of a driveway and into Ray and Linda's life. The man stopped just inside the door, like he expected to be told to get out, then cleared his throat. "I know how crazy this looks," he said, "but I need you two to hear me out. I think these came out of a storage unit, and I think somebody hid something in them on purpose." Ray didn't laugh. Pawn shop owners survive by taking strange things seriously until proven otherwise. He nodded once, calm, and slid a rubber mat onto the counter like he was making space for a normal transaction. Linda's eyes went from the bins to the man's hands, red at the knuckles, shaking just a little. Then to his face. Nervous, not drunk. Ashamed, not arrogant. The kind of customer who didn't come in to play games. "What's your name?" Linda asked. "Frank," he said quickly, and the way he said it carried a quiet plea. "Please don't think I'm a thief. Please don't think I'm stupid." He started talking before either of them could ask the next question, like he'd rehearsed it in the car. Retirement hadn't been kind. Fixed income, a rent increase, a car that needed repairs, and that slow, humiliating math of choosing which bill gets paid late. "I've been watching those videos," he admitted, eyes down. "You know, people buy those storage units, dig through junk, find something that saves them. I never do that, never. But he swallowed. "I took a risk." He told them the unit was the worst kind of lot. Wall-to-wall trash. Old bags, busted furniture, stained boxes, random cords, kids' junk. The kind of mess that makes most bidders back away because it looks like a weekend of hauling things nobody wants. He only won it because nobody else wanted the headache. He spent a day dragging the pile out, sweating through his shirt, cursing himself for thinking YouTube luck was real until he got to the back. "That's where it changed," Frank said. And he looked up at Ray and Linda like he needed them to believe him. At the very end of the unit, shoved against the back wall like somebody had staged them, were two trash bins, blue and green, covered with a blanket. Not buried under junk. Covered like they were meant to be concealed but not crushed. It felt arranged, Frank said, like somebody wanted them to be the last thing you'd see. Frank hauled them home because he couldn't leave them. He expected broken glass, rotten food, maybe yard waste. Something gross. Instead, when he popped the lid on the blue bin in his garage, he stared down at a solid, packed surface of dry white rice, filled to the brim, leveled like it had been poured carefully. Not a handful, not a bag, a whole bin of it. "Who fills a trash can with rice?" he asked. And his voice cracked a little on the word "who," because he wasn't just asking about rice. He was asking about intent. Then he opened the green bin and saw layers, cheap toys on top, then clothes, then heavier items underneath that clunked like tools. It didn't look like someone cleaning out a house. It looked like camouflage. Frank said he didn't dig deep. His gut told him not to. Instead, he rolled both bins back into his truck and drove straight to the one place he trusted to tell him whether he'd found a blessing or stepped into something dangerous. He looked at Ray and Linda and held his hands up slightly, palms open. "I'm not trying to get rich," he said, even though the fear in his eyes said he desperately needed to. I can't do this alone. If there's nothing, fine. If there's something, I want it handled right." Linda reached under the counter and pulled out gloves. Habit, not drama. Ray's voice stayed level, professional, the way it gets when he's deciding whether a story is real. "Frank," he said, "before we touch anything, did anyone see you take those bins out of the unit?" Frank hesitated a fraction too long. "I don't think so," he said, "but I felt watched." And in that half-second, with the bins sitting between the counter and the door like two silent witnesses, Ray understood the shape of the day ahead. A pawn shop wasn't just a store, it was a crossroads for other people's secrets. Sometimes those secrets came in velvet boxes. Sometimes they came in blue and green plastic, rolled in on dusty wheels, smelling faintly of garages and bad decisions. Ray nodded toward the back room. "All right," he said. "We'll do it our way. Slow, clean, and nobody outside needs to know what's in those bins until we do." Ray killed the front lights and flipped the sign to "Back in 10" without explaining it to anyone who might wander past the window. Linda rolled both bins into the rear workroom, the place where they tested gold, checked serial numbers, and made decisions that could keep the shop open another year or close it in a week. Frank hovered at the doorway, like a man afraid he'd already done something unforgivable. Ray pointed him to a chair where the security camera could see his hands. "Sit, breathe, and don't touch anything," Ray said, not harshly, just final. Linda snapped on gloves, laid a clean tarp on the floor, and placed a shallow metal tray beside it, like a surgeon preparing instruments. "We go layer by layer," she said. "Nothing gets dumped, nothing gets lost." They started with the green bin because it looked like normal junk on top, and normal was safer. Linda lifted out a mess of cheap toys. Plastic dinosaurs, a broken remote control car, a stuffed bear with a torn ear. Then a thin layer of kids' clothes that smelled like a closet, not a trash can. Under that came the weight. Carpentry tools, old but cared for. Chisels, a mallet, a hand plane wrapped in an oily rag. Ray frowned. People throw out junk. They don't bury decent tools under children's toys unless they want the tools hidden. He set each piece on the tarp, photographed it, and said quietly, "This is staged. Somebody built a disguise." Frank's face tightened like he'd expected those exact words. Halfway down, Linda's glove hit something hard and boxy that didn't match the loose chaos. She cleared away a final band of rags and revealed a small metal lockbox, scarred, military-looking, the kind that survives garages and bad weather. No key, no label, just a cheap padlock that screamed temporary. Ray didn't pry it. He shook it once, gently, and the sound inside wasn't coins. It was wood, a dry clack like poker chips. Linda eased the padlock off with bolt cutters. Clean, controlled. Then opened the lid and froze. Inside were stacks of wooden tokens, each stamped with tiny dates and symbols, wrapped in wax paper like someone knew they mattered. Not kids' play money, not craft junk. The kind of odd collectible that looks worthless until you realize it's exactly what collectors chase. Frank leaned forward to spite himself. Those were under everything," he whispered. "Why would anyone hide wooden tokens like that?" Ray didn't answer yet, because Linda had already turned to the blue bin, the rice. It sat packed and level, too perfect. She scooped the top layer into the tray, slow and careful, and the grain slid like dry sand. After a few inches, the scoop struck something that wasn't rice. Linda stopped. Ray's heartbeat did that quiet, ugly skip it always did when a maybe becomes a yes. Linda brushed rice aside with her fingertips and revealed a plastic. Vacuum-sealed bundles, taped tight, tucked deep like a body in a shallow grave. One bundle held baseball cards in rigid sleeves, edges pristine, the kind of cards grown men whisper about at shows. Another held jewelry wrapped in cloth, heavy enough to make Linda's wrist dip. Frank made a sound that wasn't a word. Ray looked at the piles on the tarp, tools, the lockbox of tokens, the buried bundles, and felt the whole story lock into place. Someone had hidden value inside trash on purpose, and the storage unit had become a dumping ground for secrets. Then the pawn shop phone rang out front. Twice in fast succession, like whoever was calling didn't believe in patience. Ray didn't move at first. He stared at the rice bin, at the exposed bundles, at Linda's gloved hands hovering above them. The phone rang a third time. Linda's eyes met his. In that look was a clear question. How did anyone know to call right now? Ray walked to the counter, picked up and kept his voice flat. "Miss Apon?" A man's voice came through, low and controlled. "I'm looking for something that isn't yours," the caller said. "And I don't like waiting." Ray didn't raise his voice, didn't argue, didn't give the caller a single useful syllable. He looked straight into the camera above the counter, as if the lens were a witness he could trust more than any stranger on the phone. "If you're claiming property," he said evenly, "you can email proof and a description. Otherwise, you're asking me to guess, and I don't guess with my business." The caller paused, then tried to push. "You opened things you shouldn't have." Ray kept the same flat tone. "We open what we're paid to sort, and everything in this shop is recorded." He didn't threaten. He simply described the reality of their world. Cameras, logs, timestamps, signatures. Linda, in the back room, silently slid the vacuum-sealed bundles into a locking cash bag and set the lockbox of wooden tokens into the safe. Frank watched her hands like she was defusing a bomb. The phone line went quiet again, as if the man on the other end had realized he couldn't bully paper and video the way he could bully a desperate retiree. "You'll hear from me," the caller finally said. Ray's reply was almost bored. "You already did." Then he hung up and pulled the store's front gate halfway down, open enough for customers to see they were alive, closed enough to say not today to anyone looking for trouble. They made one decision that changed everything. They stopped treating the find like a jackpot and started treating it like a controlled sale. Ray called 2 collectors he'd worked with for years. Quiet, local, cash-ready, the kind of buyers who paid more for clean provenance and didn't ask stupid questions in public. Linda photographed the baseball cards without showing every detail, just enough for authentication, and arranged to meet inside the shop under the cameras. The cards were real, rare enough to make the collector's hands shake slightly when he saw the centering and the edges. The jewelry tested clean. The wooden tokens, once examined by a niche specialist, turned out to be a small, documented set from an old regional company. Strange, yes, but exactly the kind of weird that brings serious money when it's complete. Piece by piece, the bins stopped being trash and became inventory with a spine. Receipts, buyer signatures, video of every handoff. No drama. No online circus. Just quiet transactions done right. Frank came back 3 weeks later looking 10 pounds lighter, like someone had finally taken a weight off his chest. Ray set an envelope on the counter and turned it so Frank could see the number before he touched it. It was more than Frank had dared to imagine when he rolled 2 ugly bins into the shop, enough to fix the car, cover rent, and still leave something in the bank. Frank tried to refuse at first, pride flaring, but Linda shook her head. "You took the risk," she said. "We took the heat. This is how it's supposed to work." He took the envelope with both hands and stared down at it like it might evaporate. Outside, the street stayed ordinary. No sedan. No shadow in the window. The bully on the phone never called again, not because the world suddenly got kinder, but because Ray and Linda had made their shop a bad place to play games. That's what their pawn shop was, when you stripped away the neon and glass cases. A place where panic walked in every day wearing different faces, and 2 steady owners turned it back into order. Ray and Linda didn't need sirens or speeches. They needed clear heads, gloves, a safe that actually locked, and the refusal to be rushed. The bins came in looking like garbage and left as the best month they'd had in years. But the real win was simpler. Their name stayed clean, their doors stayed open, and their little shop proved again that the right people behind the counter matter more than whatever comes through the door.